If you think we're living in an unstable world, just listen to this. Only 1% of our Earth is solid rock. Most of the other 99% is an oozing mass churning beneath our feet like road tar at temperatures between 2,000 and 10,000 degrees. The Earth's crust is only 20 miles thick. When that cracks, one of the greatest forces in nature erupts. There are 1,500 active volcanoes, and tonight we want to tell you about 3. One that caused the most recent mass disruption, another that's the biggest threat to a major city, and a third in the United States that could wreak havoc all around the world. The first, the disruptive volcano, has a name as long and as hard as the trouble it caused. Eyjafjallajökull means island mountain glacier in the inscrutable language of Iceland. When it blew in 2010, we started shooting this story. And we came to the right place. Over the last 500 years, Iceland's 30 volcanoes have released 1/3 of all of the lava on Earth. We put together an expedition to be the first to reach the summit after the eruption. The volcanic landscape covered in ice isn't hospitable to life or convoys for that matter. The man in front of the truck is pointing out cracks in the glacier that would swallow us whole. We covered miles of forbidding terrain at walking speed.
We're almost at the highest point.
When the trucks could go no further, we hiked with our guide, one of the world's leading authorities on volcanoes, Haraldur Sigurdsson.
Wow, that is astounding. Oh, look at that.
Hey!
Oh my God.
Incredible. What a sight. You're looking right into the crater.
Scientists rate volcanic eruptions on a scale of 0 to 8. This is a 4, which they call cataclysmic.
Tell me what you're seeing.
It's an explosive eruption, and explosions are producing big clouds of ash that are moving straight up into the atmosphere at the velocity of a few hundred feet per second and throwing out huge rocks.
How big are these pieces that we see flying?
Some of these are the size of cars.
And how high are they going up? Must be 1,000 feet.
Oh, at least 1,000 feet, but they're still red hot. They're maybe 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
What's causing these stupendous explosions that we're hearing?
Well, the big booms that we're hearing are huge gas bubbles in the magma that are popping open. They may be 100 feet in diameter, and when they get closer to the surface, the pressure inside these gas bubbles is so great that they blow off the magma that is ahead of them, and then they release the gas, and that's a big sonic boom.
Look at the Earth just erupting up into the sky. Unbelievable. This is a great place to explain exactly where volcanoes happen on the Earth. The crust of the Earth, of course, is fractured like a broken mirror, and it's fractured into about 15 major plates called tectonic plates. Volcanoes happen all around the edges where the Earth's crust is fractured. And here in Iceland, a major line runs right through the middle of the island, and the 2 plates are breaking apart. And that's exactly what you see happening behind me.
No, you don't see anything happening behind you.
What ruined our view was steam. It was exploding everywhere that the lava hit the ice. The ancient glacier was melting in a flash flood, carving canyons into the mountain. The thermal shock also lofted a fine black ash that covered farms for miles. They call it ash, but it really feels like sand. In Iceland, volunteers come out from the cities to help farmers dig out. These were bankers who brought their shovels from the capital, Reykjavik. It was this ash that made Eyjafjallajökull the most disruptive eruption in years. The ash billowed up nearly 33,000 feet and drifted 1,000 miles over Europe. 100,000 flights were canceled. 10 million people were stranded for a week. Still, Volcanologist Haraldur Sigurdsson told us that kind of trouble is nothing compared to eruptions elsewhere in the recent past.
And the best example of that occurred in 1815, when there was an eruption in Tambora volcano in Indonesia. And a big explosive eruption sent out an ash cloud up to about 30 miles. And it dispersed very widely, and also a lot of sulfur came out of this volcano. And that led to global cooling, and produced what is known as the year without a summer in New England, in North America.
The year without a summer?
The year without a summer, in 1816.
Because of this one volcanic eruption?
On the other side of the Earth. And that type of event will occur again. That eruption also led to big migrations out of Central Europe into Russia, and great disturbances worldwide.
Which volcano on Earth would you say is most dangerous to people?
It's the volcano where there's a very large population adjacent to it and on it, and that's Vesuvius in Italy.
Vesuvius is our second stop, and you might think that if anyone knew better than to live by a volcano, it would be the people around the most infamous mountain of all time. But today in southern Italy, a metropolis spreads within striking distance of Vesuvius.
Nobody wants to believe that the area that they live in could kill them.
We went for a look up close with American volcanologist Mike Sheridan. We flew over the cinder cone on the helicopters of the Guardia di Finanza, a police force that helps keep watch over the mountain. Vesuvius is Sheridan's life's work, and he has warned the government that it can't count on evacuating the number of people in harm's way.
And what is that number?
Well, it depends on the type of explosion. If there's one like the last big eruption that occurred in 1631, there would be about 600,000 people. But if it is an eruption like the 2,000 year ago eruption that destroyed Pompeii, the number could be up to 3.5 million.
Pompeii, as it was August 24th, 79 AD, the moment it was preserved under more than 10 feet of ash and rock. The boulevards, the homes, the mosaics are the volcano's contribution to history. Round here, they do a lively business in the dead. Citizens of Pompeii are frozen in timeless agony. About 16,000 were killed, sculpted where they fell. Scientists have a good idea of what these people saw after studying the evidence of what remains. Witnesses described the mountain rumbling for days before it launched a column of ash and rock 12 miles high, which fell back as hell on earth.
The wind came shooting down the sides of the mountain at more than 200 miles an hour. The air temperature was about 900 degrees, and the ash that fell throughout the region left this part of Italy uninhabitable for 300 years.
Today, from this control room, volcanologist Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo monitors the instruments that will provide Italy's early warning. He showed us those 3.5 million people that crowd all around the cinder cone of the mountain. One day, it may be up to him to sound the alarm.
How much time will you have?
Probably just a few days. We can just hope that we will have weeks or months, but we cannot make a contract with the volcano.
So your friends say, look, it hasn't erupted in hundreds of years, and you must say, that's the problem.
That's the problem. I'm trying to convince the people that this quiet mountain can be a killer.
At the base of the quiet mountain, the peaceful piazza of Torre del Greco is wiped out on average about once every 100 years, give or take. The bell tower survived the eruption of 1794, and today old men rest their feet on rock-solid evidence of what's coming next. Michael Sheridan told us that Vesuvius has a very long life ahead of it.
This pattern is complex. It has different personalities. And the last personality was rather benign, but it's got some mean personalities down there that we don't want to experience in our lifetime.
There are bigger personalities among volcanoes, which scientists call supervolcanoes. Remember our eruption in Iceland was a 4 on a scale of 8? Well, an 8 would change life on Earth. Haraldur Sigurdsson told us there is a name for one of the places where that is likely to happen. It's called Yellowstone National Park, our 3rd volcano. Old Faithful is here for a reason. In the northwest corner of Wyoming, the caldera is about 50 miles wide, so big that you can't see it from the ground. Below is what science calls a hot spot, where a vast plume of magma has pushed into the crust.
The floor of the volcano is breathing like an animal. It's rising and moving up and down because magma inside the volcano.
What's the history of eruption of the hot spot in Yellowstone?
The last eruption was about 400,000 years ago, the last big one. That was a devastating, explosive eruption. The Yellowstone size eruption will occur. Of course, we have no idea when. It's being monitored very, very closely, so there's no chance of it occurring without any warning. But it's a devastating event.
Devastating to aviation, communications, and agriculture, volcanoes can change the course of history. Never before have so many people lived within striking distance, 200 million worldwide. Science is good at warning of eruptions that are weeks away, but beyond that, it's impossible to predict which one is next or how big it will be.
Like rounds of artillery, hurricanes are coming in a salvo the likes of which we haven't seen in more than a decade. Maria, which devastated Puerto Rico this past week, was the first Category 4 to make a direct hit on the island in 85 years. Last month, Hurricane Harvey was the most ferocious rainstorm ever recorded in the continental U.S. The number of storms is higher than usual, but it's their intensity that is extremely rare, with 2 Category 4s and 2 Category 5s making landfall in a month. The question facing America's coastal cities is this: is the ferocity of these storms a fluke or the future?
No one died on Bramblewood Drive, but lives were lost. The lives we measure in memories. The bike that taught the kids how to fly, the perfect dining room chairs, the letter jacket they can't believe they saved all these years. 14831 Bramblewood in West Houston is the Shields place. Vince Shields rolled his family history to the curb and dumped decade after decade.
My wife's a seamstress, and so these are probably her patterns that she had through high school and on up. We lost a lot of personal pictures, but most of this, you know, I won't have to have a garage sale. Yeah.
Shields, who retired from Shell, has lived on Bramblewood 16 years.
Here's a water line, so I'm 6'2", so.
And the water line is as tall as you are.
It is.
6'2". He'd never seen water in the house. The flood started to drop after 2 feet, but it surged to 6 after engineers opened the gates on 2 antiquated flood control reservoirs to stop the dams from failing.
We've had church crews in here. Second Baptist, we go to Second Baptist, they had a crew out here. We have had a couple of Christian crews from Lafayette.
That's how you got all this done?
Oh, yeah.
All volunteers?
All volunteers.
People just walked up and knocked on the door?
Yeah, or you sign up at the church and put your name on the list, and people show up, and it's amazing. God works.
More than 80 people were killed, and around Houston it's estimated that 27,000 homes were destroyed. Almost 25% of Houstonians live below the poverty level, and many of their homes were in the floodplain.
This is Joe's house. You'll see him, he's in the black shirt. All right. If you have any questions, ask me or ask Joe exactly what he wants us to do.
Next door to Vent Shields, Joe Kilchrist's place was being gutted by military vets. Kilchrist kept the plywood from the last big storm season back in '05. The vets call themselves Team Rubicon.
Your masks have to stay on. You do not want to be breathing in that fiberglass. We'll walk in and I'll show you guys.
Michelle Siege says they'll have 2,000 volunteers from all over the nation for 2 months.
So yesterday I was like, I had a whole street, all the debris piles were beautiful and neat and ready for the city, and then I get assigned here this week and you turn a corner and you just see it's a whole new street full of people that need our help.
Was the world capital of fossil fuels brought low by climate change? We asked Catherine Hayhoe, a leading atmospheric scientist at Texas Tech University.
It's too early to tell. The post-mortem will take years, so to speak. Because climate science is all about the long-term statistics. We can say absolutely without a doubt that this hurricane took place over altered background conditions. Our planet is very different today than it would have been 50 or 100 years ago.
By altered background, she means that the oceans of 2017 are on track to be the third warmest on record. Warmer water intensifies hurricanes 3 ways.
First of all, in a warmer world, more water evaporates into the atmosphere. And so when a storm like a hurricane comes along, there's so much more water vapor sitting up there for that hurricane to sweep up and dump on us. The second reason is sea level rise.
Water expands when it's heated.
And that means that when a hurricane comes along, the storm surges on average will be stronger because there's more water behind them. And then the third way that we expect climate change to affect hurricanes is through warmer ocean waters. More energy, more power will be available to hurricanes in the future, enabling them to intensify faster if conditions are right, as well as become more intense.
And that's apparently what we had with Harvey.
We're starting to see it.
What have you lost?
3 cars, most of our home, and our rental property, and half of our sanity.
You've been here 20 years. Ever flood before?
Never.
Is this house in a floodplain?
No. No.
Hell hath no fury like a woman submerged. The crack of every ruined memory exposed Cynthia Neely's rage, not at Harvey, but at Houston. She's with Residents Against Flooding, a 9-year-old group suing the city. They want to toughen the law that requires developers to dig detention basins to catch runoff from buildings. Houston has grown about 25% in 20 years.
We hired top-notch hydrologists, engineers to look at a problem and say, hey, something's wrong here. City, county needs to do something. And so for all these 9 years, we've been going to mayor after mayor, year after year, begging and pleading, asking for detention basins, asking for drainage infrastructure improvements. And they just look at us like, thank you for coming, have a nice day.
Why?
It costs money. And because this city is bought and paid for by developers.
When you hear someone say these storms come along every 500 years or so, what do you say?
Bullshit. Okay? Seriously. We have had 3 500-year floods in the last 27 months. Now we have Harvey. Mother Nature is going to do what Mother Nature is going to do. That means it's going to rain, we're going to have hurricanes and tropical storms. So, by golly, do something to protect your people from it.
Mr. Mayor, I talked to one of your constituents who uses words that I can't use on TV.
Okay.
Sylvester Turner has been mayor of Houston nearly 2 years.
I understand why people are mad right now. Because if there are projects on the books, and the only thing that stopped those projects from being built was the funding.
There is a sense among citizens who have flooded homes that there has been a lack of urgency about starting these major mitigation projects.
I agree. I agree with them because, all of these things are foreseeable.
So why haven't these things been done, Mr. Mayor?
Because there hasn't been the urgency on all levels to get them done. And that's the sad part.
The threat hasn't been ignored entirely. The federal government has spent more than $100 million in the county over the years buying up homes in the floodplain. but reams of flood control proposals fill the filing cabinets at City Hall.
Sometimes it takes an event to occur that shakes people to their core. This storm has shaken people to their core. People don't want to hear the rhetoric, and I understand that. The question then becomes, are you, as elected officials and others, operating with the greatest degree of urgency?
This is heartbreaking, guys.
Yes, it is.
These are those two flood control reservoirs that were built in the 1940s. They are usually dry, which is why you see trees. A 1996 study by the County Flood Control District called them severely outdated. It's not hard to imagine, the study says, that a single storm event could have a catastrophic impact. A proposed fix was stopped by the cost, $600 million in today's dollars. But last month's catastrophic impact will be tens of billions. The former head of the Flood Control District who promoted that study lives in this house. He told us from the 1940s to Harvey, planning for the reservoirs went from, quote, brilliance to neglect to stupidity to cruelty. Over the decades, thousands of homes were built on the floodplain.
Hurricane Harvey was a human-contrived disaster. So if we have flooding, that's a natural process. A disaster is human-induced because we've put so many people in these flood-prone areas.
Sam Brody studies coastal development for Texas A&M University.
I think that climate change is one driver of this problem. So the bay is rising, we measure that, it's going to continue to rise. But if you think about climate change as one of the drivers to flood loss, it pales in the comparison to the human change and the development of the landscape and putting people more in harm's way. That's a much bigger driver of the problem.
Well, people like development. People like to have jobs.
And I think we need to promote that, but doing it in a way that is smarter, which means protecting the ecological functions of our landscape, wetlands, pulling away from these bayous, and over the long term, we're going to have more stable economy, better economic growth, because we're not going to be dragged down by these chronic flood events.
Harvey is also rewriting emergency response plans.
We're coming!
During the storm, 160 helicopters and 17,000 troops rode to the rescue.
We didn't want to hold anything back. We wanted to be more prepared than surprised.
Major General John Nichols commands the Texas Guard.
Did you have all the resources you needed to deal with this? Yes, sir, we did. We also have states that helped us. 22 states brought helicopters. 4 states brought troops. If the storms of this size are going to be the norm in the future, what are you going to have to do? I don't know if it's going to be the norm, but that could be an option. We're used to a 3-day storm. Hurricanes come in, they move fast, and they go 3 days. We've not seen a storm that came in and lingered for 6 days and dumps 50-plus inches of water in one place.
General Nichols says because Harvey exploded into a Category 4 in just 48 hours, next time he'll have to position his troops days earlier. As the nation's 4th largest city begins to dry, ideas for the future include buying more people out of their homes in the floodplains, turning 2 little-used golf courses into reservoirs, and building a massive sea gate to shield the ship channel from the Gulf. Those projects would cost about $14 billion. Back on Bramblewood Drive, we notice the piano in Vint Shield's backyard. The green sticker guarantees the collapsed upright is waterproof for 50 years. But in an age of warming oceans, there are no guarantees. Folks on Bramblewood will have to decide whether to stay or go. Their past is no guide to the future.
America's focus on Washington and our new president has overshadowed a tragic story in Italy, which otherwise would have been a more prominent story here. On January the 18th, a series of earthquakes in central Italy triggered an avalanche. It demolished the Hotel Rigopiano, then buried the ruins under 120,000 tons of snow, rocks, and mountainside. It took 10 hours for rescue crews to arrive at the remote and snowed-in resort, and no one expected survivors. 29 people died, but miraculously, 11 survived, including 4 children who spent days buried alive. Steve Kroft has been in Italy this week, learning what happened and listening to the survivors' harrowing stories.
It took place on the Gran Sasso, a magnificent mountain range with excellent skiing, just a 90-minute drive from Rome. A perfect getaway for those seeking tranquility at out-of-the-way places like the Rigopiano Hotel, a small 4-star resort that has played host to dignitaries and movie stars. But on the evening of January 18th, it was anything but tranquil. 40 guests and staff were gathered downstairs, trapped by the worst snowstorm in decades and spooked by a series of earthquakes that had rattled the hotel.
Everybody wanted to leave.
Among the snowed-in guests was Giampiero Perrette, a chef from a nearby town who was there with his wife Adriana and their 2 young children. Sometime after 5 o'clock, he went out to the parking lot to get medicine for his son.
You went out to your car?
Sono andato sopra la macchina, ho aperto lo sportellone. Yes, I went outside to the car, opened the car door, and then behind me I heard this noise of branches breaking and then a big cascade, and I started running away. I saw a tree, and I just stood near that tree.
Did the snow hit you at all? I mean, did it bury you?
Yes, the snow buried me a bit. Then I got up, and when I turned around, I saw all the cars piled on top of each other, and there was 3-4 meters of snow on top. All the trees were broken and everything.
In the hotel?
And then I saw that the hotel was gone, and my world fell apart at that moment. And I said a prayer before making any calls.
Both witness and messenger, Perrette called emergency numbers, but the cell phone signal was so weak, he wasn't sure they understood him. He would eventually run across another survivor, the hotel handyman, and he finally managed to get through to his boss.
I said to him, listen, call everybody because my phone isn't working. Call somebody to help us because the hotel's gone.
What's going through your mind?
My family, my things, everything that mattered was gone. But I didn't want to lose hope. Maybe I could still do something.
You made the phone call, and nothing happened for hours and hours. Did you hear anything? Could you hear anything at all up there?
No, non si sentiva niente. No, we didn't hear anything. We screamed, we cried out. We couldn't hear anything. There was total silence. Nothing, nothing.
The first sign of help came between 3 and 4 a.m. when an Alpine emergency team of 14 men bearing shovels and rescue equipment arrived on skis and snowshoes after a perilous trek through a blinding snowstorm. Paolo DiQuinzio led the patrol.
How long did it take you to get there?
Quasi 4 ore. 4 ore.
It took us nearly 4 hours in the snowstorm.
Dangerous?
Era molto pericoloso, anche perché
very dangerous. Pieces of snow kept falling from the side of the mountain. It was pitch black.
DiQuinzio and his men knew the area well and the hotel, but the 4-story structure had all but disappeared. They had trouble finding it, even with GPS.
Una volta arrivati sul posto,
once we got there, we saw the lights of the 2 survivors in the car. So we knew there were people there.
Poi, una volta che abbiamo iniziato,
when we started to move around, we saw bits of material sticking out of the snow, so we knew we were in the right place, and that's where the hotel was.
c'era l'albergo.
How were you physically and mentally at that point?
Distrutto. Destroyed. Physically, my feet were practically frozen, and so were my hands.
Moralmente, sapendo che
And emotionally, knowing that as they were taking me away with the sled, I was leaving my family there.
un dolore che non troppo grande.
I was in tremendous pain.
Perrette would be airlifted to a hospital in Pescara suffering from hypothermia as daybreak unveiled the extent of the tragedy. By 7 a.m., helicopters were shuttling more rescue crews to the site, where they delicately began digging with hands and shovels, looking for other survivors.
With a mountain cut off from the rest of the countryside and concerns about more avalanches or earthquakes, the government set up a makeshift command center here 17 miles away from the disaster site. It mobilized an emergency force of more than 1,000 hardened professionals and highly skilled volunteers.
They were rushed here from all over Italy, mostly organized in well-trained 34-man teams that would work around the clock, alternating 8-hour shifts off and on the mountain. At first, they didn't know where to dig. The force of 120,000 tons of snow and debris slamming into the hotel at 50 miles an hour had crushed the structure and swiveled it off its foundation. They had dogs to smell, and all sorts of fancy equipment to listen, tunnelers to dig holes, and snakers to go down in them. 41 hours went by with no signs of life. The rescuers had no way of knowing it, but there were 9 survivors down there on the other side of the snow. Among them, Giorgia Galassi and Vincenzo Forti, who were sipping tea when the avalanche exploded through the hotel.
What did it sound like?
Come una bomba.
Like a bomb.
Sì, sì, è stato un boato, poi...
Yes, it was a roar, and then everything fell.
Come un'onda che mi veniva sopra, che mi travolgesse.
I felt like a wave pushed over me. That's what I felt.
And 3 seconds later, you were in a hole.
Sì.
A very dark, tiny hole. Their cell phone flashlight revealed that they were trapped in a very small air pocket encased in snow, ice, broken timbers, and tree limbs.
Abbiamo subito gridato per vedere se c'era qualcun altro.
We immediately screamed to see if there was anybody else, and we heard that there were other voices and other people, and we communicated with them to know how they were.
How many people did you make contact with, or could you hear?
Allora, io e lui eravamo vicini e vicino a noi c'era una ragazza.
The two of us were close to each other, and there was another girl, but we couldn't see the other girl. And then a guy, I think he was behind us, who we couldn't see but we could hear. And then a mother with a child we could hear.
Sentivamo anche.
You were there almost 60 hours, 50-some hours. How did you spend the time?
Dormivamo, chiacchieravamo.
We slept, we spoke among each other, we did nothing.
Just waited.
Sì.
Did you ever lose hope when you were down there? What's going through your mind when you were down there in the dark?
No, lì nessun pensiero.
No, you're not thinking. We never lost hope that someone would come for us.
On January 20th, after 2 nights of being entombed, they finally heard the voices of rescuers above. It would take 10 more hours to get them out.
That's a long time.
Sì, però non c'è pesato.
Yes, but it didn't weigh on us because we were so happy they had arrived.
Hanno sempre parlato con noi.
And they always spoke to us and they made us calm. They always kept us in contact with them. They never gave up on us, not even for a moment. Not 1 second in all those hours.
It was a miracle.
Il vero miracolo l'hanno fatto I soccorritori.
The true miracle was done by the rescuers.
I heard somewhere that you said you called them angels. Did that happen?
allora loro ti tirano fuori da quasi...
They take you out from underground, so it is fair to say they gave you life for a second time.
Nascere una seconda volta. Quindi,
If you can't call them angels, I don't know who the angels are at this point. My life, my second life, I owe it to them.
You do it because of what's in your heart.
Calling.
Una missione, giusto?
Yes, it's a mission.
Gianpiero Perrette, the witness and messenger, was still in the hospital when he learned that his son, Gianfilippo, his wife, Adriana, and finally, hours later, his 6-year-old daughter, Ludovica, had all been pulled safely from the rubble. The little girl was evacuated to the hospital along with 2 other children that she'd been alone with in an air pocket. They didn't know it at the time, but both of the young boys had been orphaned, their parents among the 29 dead.
I'm happy for myself, for my family, but I hold the people I met there that day in my heart. We'd become almost like friends because it was a small hotel. I'm very sad for them. I'm not celebrating. I feel I have a duty to respect their pain, even though I'm happy for my family.
What should people take away from this story, this tale?
I think this story nurtures a sense of family. Because once you go through this, you can't help but see that 1 second you're here and the next you're gone. Unfortunately, it could have happened to me on the mountain. It could have happened to you in the street. And I think it's reawakened a desire for family, for prayer, for the important things in life. In our society, we're always running around and we never sit still. Maybe we have to be reminded about what really matters.
Fighting wildfires in America cost federal agencies almost $2 billion last year, including more than half the budget of the U.S. Forest Service. Wildland fires are growing worse in a time of drought and climate change, and the biggest and most destructive fires can't be stopped. They are a force of nature. Imagine trying to stop a hurricane. Yet the government has to try because more than 100 million Americans now live in or near forests and grasslands that can erupt in flames. This is what's left of a neighborhood in the Kern River Valley. It's outside Bakersfield, California. Much of the valley burned in a wildfire that swept across 75 square miles. It killed 2 people and destroyed 285 homes. The wildlands that fed this fire are the same wildlands that attracted residents like Fred Roach. Is this the view that brings people to live in this spot?
It's the view that brought us here, yes, sir.
Roach lives amid mountains covered with grass so dry that lightning strikes or human activity can easily set it on fire. He used to be a firefighter and saw smoke rise over the valley on June 23rd.
The wind was blowing 20, 30 miles an hour, and it came right at us.
The fire moved miles in a matter of minutes, faster than fire crews under Chief Brian Marshall could keep up.
I never expected this fire to do what it did. This is going to go down as one of the fastest spreading wildland fires in California's history.
Why did it spread so quickly?
Wind. Wind coupled with drought, hot, dry conditions on a summer day in the Kern River Valley, and all we needed was a spark, and there was no stopping that fire.
It kept burning despite the efforts of firefighters who spent $22 million trying to stop it. Is there something the public doesn't get about the really big, fast-moving, dangerous fires?
When you have the extreme fire behavior, when the weather, fuel, and topography sets up, there may not be anything that we can do.
More houses than ever lie within the reach of such fires. There are now 43 million homes in or near wildlands. They're in every part of the country. Neighborhoods amid forests and grasslands are now so common they have their own special name. It's called the Wildland-Urban Interface, where people can live close to nature and to the fires that burn there.
These homes are part of the urban interface. This entire community here is the urban interface. And we are fighting wildland fires in the middle of these neighborhoods.
As more houses are built near wildlands, more of them burn. 50 years ago, wildfires destroyed a few hundred structures per year across the United States. Now it's more than 3,000. Last November, wind-driven wildfires near Gatlinburg, Tennessee, killed 14 people and damaged or destroyed more than 2,400 homes and businesses. In Northern California the year before, this fire burned more than 1,000 homes, helping to make 2015 the most destructive and costly year of wildfires in U.S. history.
There's a lot of homes here, and they're really close to this fire.
Of the tens of thousands of wildfires that break out each year, only a few get this bad. But they're the ones that burn the most land, destroy the most homes, and cost the most in often futile efforts to fight them.
Fire has always been part of the landscape. It will always be part of the landscape.
Robert Bonney was Undersecretary for Natural Resources and Environment at the U.S. Department of Agriculture during the Obama administration. For 3.5 years, he oversaw the Forest Service, the country's largest firefighting agency.
Over 1,000 engine strike teams were summoned to protect life and property from an inferno.
For decades, Forest Service crews tried to put out every fire by the next morning. It was a heroic undertaking with a side effect. They were stamping out fires that would normally have cleared out deadwood and undergrowth. Instead, that fuel built up over time, setting the stage for bigger fires.
Fires in a lot of those forests are burning differently than they did before. There are really two reasons for that. One is climate change. We're seeing weather patterns and extreme weather events, drought and other things that are causing those fires to burn differently. And the second reason is because for so long we preached fire suppression and putting out those small fires, we've built up fuel loads. And so our fires are burning hotter, they're burning bigger, they're more catastrophic.
And the fire season, which once lasted a few months, now lasts almost all year. As the fires grew worse, more people were moving in. Since 1990, 60% of all the homes in the United States have been built in the wildland-urban interface, where the beauty comes with risks. In 2012, a wildfire swept out of the Rockies and into these neighborhoods on the edge of Colorado Springs, destroying 347 homes.
The challenge is we've got houses in places we didn't used to have houses, and that puts people and property at risk. And so we're having to fight fire in a different way than we did before.
Tell me about the wildland-urban interface. Who's in control of it?
The federal government isn't in the business of land use. That's really done at the local county or municipal level. And the decisions that are made there have huge consequences for the American taxpayer because we will spend more money, and today are spending more money firefighting because of where those houses are on the landscape.
Private property owner buys land, gets permission from the county or whoever to build a house, and the federal government ends up getting the bill to try to protect that house.
There's no question that we're spending more on the federal government side firefighting today because of houses in the landscape that we had nothing to do with approving.
Over the last 20 years, all federal agencies together have spent $25 billion to put out fires. Bonney would rather spend some of that money thinning out forests before they burn.
We're not investing as much as we can and should in forest restoration because we're having to spend all our money fighting fire.
Wait a minute. Forest restoration is prevention of horrible wildfires.
That's right.
Are you taking money away from prevention?
Absolutely. The other issue is we put firefighters' lives in danger if we ask them to fight fires that essentially we can't stop.
It's real dicey in the subdivision. Kind of use your judgment.
Since 1990, a total of 468 firefighters have died in the wildlands, including these men. They were elite firefighters known as the Granite Mountain Hotshots. In 2013, they deployed to fight this fire outside Yarnell, Arizona. Time-lapse video shows how the wind shifted the fire in a dangerous new direction. The 19 men were trapped and killed. In the town they died trying to protect, no residents were hurt, but 129 buildings burned. Events like this add urgency to the work at a U.S. Forest Service lab. In this building in Missoula, Montana, scientists study how fires spread. And one of them, Jack Cohen, made a specialty of how to better defend homes.
Clearly, we're not going to solve the problem by telling people they're going to have to move their houses into a city from being out in the woods.
Not going to happen.
Right, it's not going to happen for a whole bunch of reasons. One of which is that the population who live there, including me, aren't going to do it.
Is it reasonable for a homeowner in that situation, a fire bearing down on their neighborhood, to just say, look, I pay my taxes. There are firefighters. There's a fire department. The Forest Service, if it's public land, has thousands of firefighters. It's their job. Put it out.
So what if they can't? Then the question becomes one of, well, if the extreme wildfires are inevitable, does that mean that wildland urban fire disasters are inevitable? And my answer to that is no. At no point did anybody identify how homes ignited.
Cohen realized that if he understood the way houses catch fire, he could figure out how to protect them.
What ignited this house and burned it down were the little things.
The little things. Cohen learned that a wildfire throws up a blizzard of embers that wind can drive up to a mile. The embers, also known as firebrands, start new fires if they land on something flammable, like wooden shingles, wooden decks, firewood against a wall, pine needles in a gutter.
And most frequently, the things that it's igniting is debris around the structure. It's the stuff that's there primarily because we live there.
Jack Cohen says he knows these are danger spots because he ran simulations with life-sized homes in a lab.
We have firebrand generators, and you can watch millions of these brands then begin to collect wherever they land. If the base of the house has flammable material, we end up with fire. We see the gutters igniting and putting flame right up against the eave line. What if we don't have anything that can support fire within 5 feet of the structure? What if we don't have pine needles in the gutters, right? Then the firebrands, it doesn't matter from how far they come, don't ignite anything.
Just clean the gutters?
Clean the gutters. Clean the debris off your deck.
Last summer's fast-moving fire in Kern County, California became a real-world demonstration of Jack Cohen's research. Kern County requires property owners to clear 100 feet of defensible space around homes. You can tell the ones who probably did and the ones who likely didn't. 1 week before the fire, an inspection found that one house looked like this. A week later, the house looked like this. Fire Chief Brian Marshall says he didn't have enough fire engines in the county to protect every vulnerable home.
Maybe 100 foot of defensible space isn't enough for this house, but it didn't have any.
If you were just driving through Kern County, you might think it's completely random that this house burned and this one didn't. The owner says it's not. It's the house of Fred Roach, that retired Forest Service firefighter.
This house right here was prepared and did not need the air tanker full of retardant or the helicopter full of water or all the engines to protect it. It protects itself.
Fred Roach thought about fire when improving his home and says anyone can do what he did.
The house was stuccoed about 5 years ago, and we stuccoed everything under the eaves, the entire thing.
Stucco's basically fireproof?
Yeah, basically.
Close to it?
Close to it. And then we took all the redwood decking off the deck and replaced it with synthetic.
Which doesn't burn nearly as easily.
No, we had embers all over this deck and nothing happened.
So now that you're retired, do you still find yourself mentally triaging houses as you drive past them? That one's defensible, that one is hopeless.
Of course I do. Yeah. We discuss it all the time, my wife and I. You know, I sure wish that they do this, or I sure wish that they do that. There's nothing we can do about it.
Which is frustrating to Judy Hyatt. She's president of the Kern River Valley Fire Safe Council. It urges homeowners to make their homes less flammable. Many people tell her they don't have time. When people have not properly prepared their homes, what do they expect from their fire department when
they expect
fire
them
approaches?
to be there, particularly the aircraft. And most of the time they are. Maybe this fire will cause people to have second thoughts because this time they couldn't be there and couldn't keep up with what was going on when they did get there.
Do you think that most homes could be built and maintained in such a way that when a fire approaches, people could just evacuate, wait for the fire to pass,
I do.
and otherwise ignore it?
I do.
Meaning we could do a lot less to fight fires and just be prepared better.
You have to be prepared better before you do less, because right now we're not. We really aren't.